morning and welcome to another weekly update. It's been a little while since we've done one not from my desk, but I am traveling at the moment and that's why this one is slightly different. Throwback to when I used to do quite a lot of my weekly updates on mobile, so apologies if you don't quite like this format. There's less cutting to what's on my screen because that stuff's hard when you're traveling, but this is a setup that I found works kind of for me. All right, so first thing to tell you about this week really is that we're kind of doing a lot of looking forward till next week. So Microsoft Ignite is next week. That's going to be a big place to catch up on what's been happening in the last 12 months and just have a look forward to the next 12 months as well. It's going to be all about AI. It's going to be all about Copilot. There's no real surprises there. I would expect lots of stuff about agentic behavior and the use of agents. But other than that, I think we're just gonna have to wait for the sessions, wait for the content, see what interesting stuff gets announced. That does kind of play into a little bit of the announcements this week because they are definitely light on features and new things because everybody's holding their things back for Ignite by now, and everybody's ready to go with that content. If you don't have tickets to go to Ignite, don't worry. A lot of it is done virtually. Microsoft are getting back into in-person conferencing, but at the moment, a lot of that content, especially the important content they really want you to know about, that stuff is all virtual still, so you can still get it remotely. That's what I'll be doing. It's still a very easy conference to stay up to date with what's happening. And again, this time next week, I'll do a roundup of things from Microsoft Ignite. Other things that have been happening. The Azure Communication Services team are really committed at the moment to putting out really high quality blog content. We talked about it last week, and I think even the week before, and this week there's another good one. This is an interesting idea. So Azure Communication Services can send out email, can send out bulk email. You can use it in that way to send out high volume of messages from your organization. What they've put together is some sample code here to run all of the messages that you would be sending through your organization, to run them through a couple of checks around using AI to make sure that you're not adding any sensitive personal information or that the tone is appropriate. It's not, it doesn't impact your reputation for your brand and your business and all that branding stuff. So it's an interesting idea. It's a way that you can kind of build out the capabilities of having something like Azure Communication Services that can send email. There's sample code in here for how to do that. They call it a pre-check, which kind of makes sense. It sits just in front of the send, and I think the idea is that you abstract away from having your code call the Azure Communication Services send directly, and instead you have it call this package that you write, and that allows you to do some of those pre-send checks. Really good idea, nice idea, and the blog post is well written as well with lots of the sample code in as well, so you can try it yourself, which is nice. It's a nice way of doing it. It does add some AI kind of goodness, if you like, into your email flow, so if that's something you want to do, then definitely go check out that blog post because it's a good one. And also props, I think, to the Azure Communication Services team for putting in this effort. It is a lot of effort putting these blog posts together, especially the example sample ones. I know it is because I've done them. So it's really good that they're consistently doing it. So I think that's really nice. Okay, shift gears slightly again to adaptive cards. There's an update to some of the documentation around adaptive cards, and I wanted to call it out because it is something that is a bit of a pain to do, honestly, which is responsive layout stuff. So adaptive cards are great, and the idea behind adaptive cards is really good, which is that you do your design for adaptive cards and then they will render correctly in all of the different devices that support adaptive cards, and you don't have to think too much about it. And that is true. That is exactly how it works. However, some of the layout stuff and some of the decisions that adaptive cards can make around how to structure your layout on different devices might not be always exactly what you want. And so in this update to the documentation, which I'll put a link to in the description, you can use container layouts to kind of a bit more accurately or a bit more intentionally describe how it is you want your content laid out in different scenarios. And so, yeah, it's a nice way of doing it. It should allow for better responsive content and the way that things get wrapped sensibly and kind of according to what you want them to do. So that's definitely worth checking out, because if you do anything with adaptive cards, you've probably come across this. I know I have, where you've done your adaptive cards and they look great, and then you go and look at them on different other devices, especially mobile devices, I'm thinking, and it kind of is, it's a bit all over the place sometimes. It isn't quite what you would do. So this gives you a bit more control over sort of structuring it so it can be more how you want it to be rather than just how the system does it. So it's worth figuring that stuff out. It's worth reading through it and seeing if there's stuff in there that you can tweak for your adaptive cards just to make them a little bit more, just render a bit more sort of intentionally, I suppose, on different devices. Okay, last thing I want to talk about, and it is something Copilot-y. So not all the announcements got held for Ignite. There's this one, and it's around using GitHub Copilot in Visual Studio, and Visual Studio 2002. So this is an interesting way to use Copilot, and I think we probably all do this today. I certainly do as well. Is that, yes, we've got Copilot, and we've got Copilot in both Visual Studio Code and Visual Studio, which is more, it's kind of a bit like IntelliSense on steroids, right? It's that same experience where you're about to type something, or you're taking a pause as you go to think about it, and it will prompt you for what it thinks you're about to type, which is great. It's really, really useful. It's a ton of time savings. It can keep you honest and stop you making silly mistakes, especially if you're kind of copying and pasting variables around, like referencing from one place to another place. It's really good at doing stuff like that, and I find it really useful. What I've found though is that there's a different type of interaction with AI that I have, which is much more conversational, which is, you start with a code snippet and then you ask it some questions like, could I keep this code snippet, but what if I wanted to add pagination? What if I wanted to add error handling? What if I wanted to reverse the order? What if I wanted to do something else? Is this optimized for speed? Is it optimized for reliability? What would you do differently? All of these questions are really useful to have in a kind of much more conversational way with an AI. I've so far flipped to using something completely outside of Visual Studio for this. I use ChatGPT, but in a different environment, in a different window, different experience, different application, for my conversations there. What this blog post from the Visual Studio blog is saying is that some of that conversational stuff is coming into Visual Studio. I believe it's there already for Visual Studio Code. I kind of don't use it, and that's on me, but I tend to use Visual Studio as much as I use Visual Studio Code, so I'm going to dig into this. And it looks like that conversational piece has come into Visual Studio in a bit more structured way and a bit easier to access. Hopefully it's done with the intention, with the context of the code that you are currently looking at. That would be really useful. So I've got the class open, and then I've got this window on the side, which is my conversation with the AI, and I can directly reference things I'm looking at in the window. That would be really useful. I'm excited to try this out. Again, like all of these AI things, give them a go. Don't dismiss them immediately because they don't sound like a thing you'd be interested in. Try it because you just don't know, and it takes a while to kind of change your working practices a little bit, I think. And so it's worth digging in and trying these things and seeing if they help, because I've seen real performance improvements on code, and that's not just me. There's studies, lots of people are saying the same thing. Coding development, really, really good place to look for optimizations using AI. All right, that's everything from me. I hope you have a great week, and I will speak to you again, probably back at my desk next time.